So we're nearly at the end of the Paris Summer Olympics, and issues around gender identity have been a real flashpoint. There was this huge outcry over the participation of Algerian boxer Imani Khalif and other athletes in female sports who have XY chromosomes. And in 2023, actually, officials disqualified Khalif from the International Boxing Association tournament. During the Olympics, Khalif infamously punched the Italian boxer Angela Carini so hard that Carini quit the fight after 46 seconds. Imani Khalif's final match is tomorrow, and she's going to get at least a silver medal. And we should note that Khalif identifies as a woman. Here she was a few days ago in a quarterfinal against a Hungarian boxer who said that it wasn't fair that Khalif was in the women's category. It's been really hard to watch these clips. Contrast that with a story of a female wrestler from India, Vinesh Phogat. Now, Phogat had a chance to become the first woman from India to win an Olympic gold, but was disqualified when she missed her weight class by just a few ounces. Like, think about this as the weight of a medium-sized banana. And now she's announced her retirement. So, Rupa, help us situate this in the larger culture wars right now. How did this become a flashpoint, correctly or incorrectly, for the culture wars around gender that we're experiencing right now?
So Batya, this was a really hard one for me, especially when it comes to Imani Khalif, the boxer. This is a person who grew up female, but she's DST, so differences in sexual development. She is not trans, as many people asserted last week, and so she grew up female, but she has this XY chromosome thing. The point is that some people with women can have testosterone levels which are could be considered at male levels and still be women and still compete as women in sports. So I'm just conflicted here, because here is someone who trained her whole life for to get to the Olympics, and then her medical records are now out in the open, and the IOC okayed her entry into the Olympics. And there's a whole other tragic story of people like Imani who are exploited by bad actors in countries, who'd like to raise a country's profile in that sport. And she genuinely seemed to me like someone who'd worked extremely hard to get to where she is, and now she's been humiliated on the world stage, and in a really, really bad way. With Phogat, it's a different issue. It's about a weight class, which can be easily, this is something that you can actually fix. Why do you only have 6 weight classes? So Phogat, who missed her weight class by just 100 grams, or the size of a medium-sized banana, would have won gold. I mean, she was well placed to win gold, but in the end, she was disqualified because she couldn't meet the weight class. Ultimately, I think the IOC is to blame here. At least when it comes to wrestling, they should have more weight classes. Other wrestlers who've competed in the Olympics, like Burroughs, he's a really well-known American wrestler, has called for increasing the weight class. And I think here's a viewpoint that I have, which I tweeted a few days ago. India, for example, recognizes something called a third gender. So people like Imani compete in their own sports. Why is it that we don't have a third category for sports that accommodates people like Imani?
Question. Right. And would there be enough people in that category to even have a sort of competitive sport? Michael, I found myself kind of, my emotions all over the place. When I first saw the clips of Imani Khalif, I was sort of horrified. I mean, you really felt like you were seeing a man just beat up a woman. But then I saw the clips that Rupa was talking about of like her anguish at what was done to her in such a public way. And obviously this is a person who comes from you don't even want to imagine, right? Like
Yeah,
what it was like growing up, as this person in Algeria like this. So I found my emotions really going back and forth on this. Where are you on this story?
Look, I think that's the right reaction. I think you have to be sort of monstrous in a way if you don't look at her reaction in seeing, weeping and being very upset about like being dragged through. I mean, like, obviously this has been a difficult thing for her since she was born. I mean, this is an actual condition but on the other hand, there's two things about this. You have to have sympathy for these boxers who, a number of whom, the Hungarian one, the Italian one before it, and somebody else, I can't remember who made the X sign for the XY chromosome after the fight. And they're saying this is a totally different type of fighting. This is like being hit by a Mack truck when someone punches you, which is obviously not what they're used to, right? And there's also obviously also a reason that people are checking for this stuff. You don't check for this stuff if it doesn't matter, right? So I do have a tremendous amount of sympathy, but there again has to be some rule clarification here. And also, like, people were getting in high dudgeon online that she was being, I guess, or wrongly tagged as being transgender when she wasn't. It's a misunderstanding that I understand. Like, I understand when I saw that, I said, wait, XY, these are very complex issues. The average person doesn't know, but you're just hearing these boxers say, getting hit by this woman is nothing like I've ever experienced before. And she's about to, go for a gold medal match. I mean, it's not as if, because the comparison I think a lot of people make subconsciously is it's not, the swimmer, the transgender swimmer from Penn, Leah Thomas, was, ranked 85 millionth in the world. I was a faster swimmer, like slightly faster, and then went into the women's category and was like, taking home records. There's that kind of, it's redolent of that here, is that it's not just like something that's like, oh, it's a little, doesn't make much of a difference. I mean, she's about to go to the gold medal round and other people are complaining. So I don't know the answer to this at all, because it seems to be that scientists and medical professionals, people better suited, and not people on Twitter, to answer these questions. But it's certainly a thorny one, and one that I was not expecting from this Olympics.
But Coleman, isn't it fair for this to be a symbol for the since we're talking about vibes so much, for the emotions that people have seeing transgender athletes in women's sport? Is that not a fair, at the symbolic level, is it not fair for this to be a catalyst, a moment in which we say, wait a minute, we're so uncomfortable with this. Surely the people uncomfortable with that maybe have a point, or are they totally separate conversations?
Look, I mean, there's the initial reaction that we should all have when you suspect someone who is a man or has had a male development beating up a woman. Everyone should react to that with those emotions. But once the emotional reaction is gone, we have to think about, actually, how do we set policy? Because this is a very difficult case. The Leah Thomas case is not difficult, right? Mm. And the reason these cases are difficult is because the principle is easy, but the scientific details are really hard. So the principle is that the whole reason we separate that there is such a thing as women's sports, and then the male category is usually actually an open category. Like, in principle, most male sports, women are allowed to play. They just can't qualify. Mm-hmm. The reason we do that is because if you've had a male development, it gives you an enormous advantage. So the principle is, if you've had a male development, a male puberty, a male, everything that happens with testosterone in a male development, you shouldn't be competing against women. That's very easy. The hard part is applying that to an actual edge case condition like this one, where you actually have someone, and I don't think her exact sub type is yet known necessarily, but I think the smart experts I've seen on X have been saying that likely she has XY chromosomes, which would, under many definitions of sex, make her actually a male, but has female typical external, like, secondary sex characteristics like genitals and so forth. Look, so like, that's a genuinely difficult case. The question, though, is easy. Has she had a male development in terms of her muscles and her skeleton? I can't answer that question. I'm not an expert, but I think that experts should get together and actually go through all 500, subtypes that probably in India get thrown into a third sex, and say scientifically which of these have had a testosterone drenched male development and which have not.
So, Rupa, I wanted to ask you this because we ran an op-ed at Newsweek by someone on the left who said, well, conservatives, I guess it's not so easy to say what is a woman, right? He was sort of, there's been this whole conversation, right? Matt Walsh and so forth about how, and the whole conversation around Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson saying, I'm not a biologist, I can't define what a woman is. And now suddenly we're all sitting here being like, well, there are all these liminal cases. Is it this? Is it that? Do you think that that's a fair argument?
You see, Batya, the thing is, we've entirely focused on the trans issue, right? Our conversations are entirely about people taking puberty blockers, people transitioning, and so on. We don't actually talk about people who are born this way, and that's a small group of people, no question, but they do exist, and they're increasingly making their they're making their mark in sports. I'm originally from India, and I grew up seeing people like Imani Khalif on everywhere. They're revered in Hinduism, actually, so they're considered to bring you good luck. India, which is a very conservative country in some ways, actually recognizes the third gender. The Supreme Court of India recognizes the third gender, and so they have all rights as everybody else. And it's a very complex issue. I do think that moving forward, I mean, as Coleman said, we have to talk about policy here. All we're doing is we're just outraging when we see these things, but we're not actually working towards a solution. And the solution, I really think, even if it is not feasible financially, because this is still a very small group of people competing in this category, I think we really need to have a serious discussion about what happens to sports, because this is not going to go away. There are going to be more such people.
Rupa, I apologize. You said you grew up in India. I called you a Canadian. And I want to apologize right now for offending you if you want to be called Indian. So you're both a Canadian and Indian in my book.